All right, everybody, welcome back into another episode of Fantrax Football Friday. My name is Colin McTamany of Fantrax. Sometimes we're live, sometimes we're not, depending on our guest availability. And this guest is very important for the second episode. I have Mike Kashuba. Mike, how you doing today?
I am excited to talk about football, doing Fantrax Friday on a Tuesday. Sorry, everybody. Would rather be live, but life gets in the way.
No, it's all good. I don't think too much is going to change between Tuesday, February 20th and Friday when this comes out.
Yep.
If it does, I'm sure we'll be talking about it on Twitter. I know you and I follow each other. We'll be sending some stuff out here, but I just
Yep.
want to get a idea of where we're at with the state of the quarterback position heading into 2024. Obviously, the draft is coming up. Quarterbacks are the talk of the town. Last year, tons of injuries at the position.
Mm-hmm.
You had your standard elite guys. You had guys that you wanted to believe in that got banged up. Then we had some guys really break onto the scene, i.e., CJ Stroud. Try to get an idea after this conversation of whether or not we should really stick with those elite guys. Who are the elite guys, or should we wait at the position? Let's just have a conversation here. Try to determine how many quarterbacks there are that we would feel comfortable going into week one of the 2024 fantasy football season with. I know it's early, it's February, a lot is left to play out. Free agent wide receivers will be on the move. We have the draft coming up. We'll see where some of these free agents go, but let's just try to get an idea of where we're at today on February 20th. So we'll hash out these certain situations. And I want to start just by going through tiers that I made up. And again, these are extremely loose. It's February 20th. Just try to count how many quarterbacks we have that we feel comfortable with. This first tier is the elite tier. No questions. I don't think either of us have about any of these guys. It's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I still have Jalen Hurts here. I know last year was a little bit iffy with that Eagles offense towards the end, but Jalen Hurts scored 15 rushing touchdowns. You just can't really discount a guy that's doing that. All three of these guys finished inside the top four in rush attempts, rush yards, rushing touchdowns, top three in total points and points per game. If you remove Joe Flacco, who had an elite 5-game stretch there at the end. Any pushback here on Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, or Jalen Hurts?
No pushback at all. If anything, I've pushed back against anybody that is pushing back against Jalen Hurts. Like, this is a fantasy football focused chat. And from a fantasy football perspective, Jalen Hurts was the quarterback 2 in points per game. The rushing attempts aren't going anywhere. Even if they ban the tush push, he's still a power lifter at quarterback. Like, quarterback sneaks are still going to be a gold mine for him. So they're all set it and forget it. And I don't think people need to know that. Maybe we'll talk about not reaching on him in redraft, though.
Yeah, that's true. I think any quarterback that is adding that rushing ability to their game is someone that you want to target in fantasy football. That's not a secret at this point. The Eagles backfield, myself an Eagles fan, as you can see behind me, I don't know what that backfield is going to look like in 2024. I'm not sure they're going to bring back DeAndre Swift. He was okay anyway. Boston Scott's probably gone. Kenneth Gainwell is probably the only guy that's going to stick around. So depending on who they bring in, could take some work away from Jalen Hurts in the run game. Maybe they want him to throw more in Kellen Moore's offense. But yeah, I agree. It's fantasy football. I appreciate you putting that out there. This is a fantasy-focused chat here on Fantrax, and Jalen Hurts deserves to be in that elite tier. That next tier I have here is the weekly set and forget. Maybe not elite 100% of the time, but you feel pretty good about them every week. So much so that once you draft them, you're putting them in your lineup. The only time you're really taking them out is their bye week. That's Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray. Yes, that Kyler Murray that came back last year after a torn ACL. Any objections here? Any comments on these guys?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate because I love Joe Burrow as a prospect. He went to the rival Bengals, so as a Steelers fan, I'm obligated to hate him. Like, he last year in points per game was what, 15.4? Like, that is not a set it and forget it quarterback. We're talking about turmoil in the cap space, trying to figure out how they're going to keep all the weapons together. We're trying to figure out what the Cincinnati offense is going to look like next year. Is it more likely that the year that he was the top 5 quarterback with an insane touchdown percentage was an outlier, or is it more likely that he's going to be able to do that every single year? If I'm a betting man, I'm not going to swing on Joe Burrow at his ADP because you're attracted to the cool. You're attracted to how exciting it is. You want to root for Joe Burrow, but he's not going to score as many fantasy points. And we're not here to get cool points. So a little worried about Joe Burrow. Another guy that it stinks to call this out, but Justin Herbert had a bit of an underwhelming 2023. Now you add Harbaugh as as his head coach. Like, Harbaugh doesn't want to air it out. JJ McCarthy once threw 9 passes in a game. When we're looking at what the Chargers offense is going to be. Maybe they're going to try to take a little bit off of Herbert's plate, stop the bombs away, stop the air it out. I would love to add a Malik Neighbors at 5. I would love to add a Marvin Harrison Jr., a Brock Bowers, like get him another weapon. But the volume is going to go down. And that is a red flag for somebody that, while he does have some rushing upside, he's not a Kyler Murray. He's not a Jalen Hurts. He's not a Lamar Jackson. He's more of a fancy Daniel Jones when it comes to running. Not a bad way, but doesn't have the same upside. So 2 guys that, if they are in this tier, I would move them down. And if people are drafting them this high, I will be avoiding them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what their ADP is come July, August time. I actually disagree a little bit with Joe Burrow. The 2 seasons prior to this one, he was one of a couple quarterbacks that averaged 20 points per game in each season. So I do feel a little bit better about Joe Burrow. Remember, he did come into last season with that calf injury, maybe rushed back a little too quickly, and then obviously hurt his thumb, his wrist, I believe. But, the guy that has Jamar Chase on his team, I still like a lot. But again, if he's going high, like you just said, depending on his price tag, probably a little bit of a fade for me. But I actually think you can get Joe Burrow maybe at a discount based on some of the guys in the next tier we're going to talk about. As far as Justin Herbert, I do agree with you there. Not only did Jim Harbaugh come in, but he did bring in Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator, run-heavy guy. He was the offensive coordinator in Baltimore from 2019 to 2022. They pretty much led the league in rush attempts, obviously with Lamar Jackson, but Justin Herbert's not Lamar Jackson. He does not run like Lamar Jackson. He can run, but not 9-10 times a game like Lamar is. And you mentioned Jim Harbaugh, with J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. I think they ran the ball 38 times in the national championship game. So
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really like Justin Herbert's talent. I like his arm. We need to see what kind of weapons he has there. I think Keenan Allen or Mike Williams could be moving on. Hopefully they get another weapon in there. I don't know if they'll do that at 5, but who they add at running back is going to be key for me to see what they do. Austin Eckler is likely going to move on. Do they bring in a big name? If so, I'll probably avoid Justin Herbert because I think they're going to feed that name the rock. But if it is just Blake Corum, as a lot of people are speculating that they add in the draft, feel a little bit better about Justin Herbert because I don't know if Blake Corum is a 300 carry kind of guy. Moving on to this next tier, I named it the mostly high floor, high ceiling starters. Just trying to come up with names here to, group these guys. And it's pretty big. We've got Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud, who's going to be popular. I actually think a guy like CJ Stroud could go over Joe Burrow, what I was alluding to earlier. Justin Fields, don't know where he's going yet. Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford. Feel really good about all of these guys. Are they going to score you 25 points per game? Maybe once every, couple weeks or so, but they at least have that high floor that you can, I think, depend on week to week. Any of these guys stand out for you in this tier?
I pre-draft was in love with Anthony Richardson. Honestly, still am. You put a little note in here talking about what he was able to do in full games played, like 23.1 points per game in his 3 complete games. If there is a guy here that is going to move into that elite tier, move into the Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson tier, it is Anthony Richardson. Another year to develop, leave him in the slow cooker a little bit, like really get attuned to an NFL system. I think that he is a week 1 starter and a very early target for me in all formats.
Yeah, I think there's actually a recency bias with the quarterback position. A lot of these guys got hurt, Anthony Richardson being one of them. Out of sight, out of mind. You forget how some of these guys played when they were actually on the field. Even Justin Herbert, who we just talked about, I think the first 4 games for the Chargers, he averaged like 24 points per game before their week 5 bye. Obviously, some things didn't go his way there on out, but we forget about how these guys produced early on last season because a lot of guys started to emerge later in the season, especially at the quarterback position. CJ Stroud, Jared Goff even started to emerge down the stretch as a guy you could believe in. But Anthony Richardson, as I mentioned, as you just brought up again, 23 points per game in 3 complete games. Definitely has the rushing upside. I do think they retain Michael Pittman. So add Anthony Richardson to a guy that maybe people don't target early on, but you should absolutely feel good about starting him week 1. I do think they continue to add weapons there alongside Michael Pittman, alongside Josh Downs, and good running game behind him with Jonathan Taylor. Yep. The next tier is a little small, but I've got good, not great, probably streaming these guys. So not trying to insult any of them, but I want more, and we're just haven't gotten it from either of these guys on a consistent basis. And that's Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, Trevor Lawrence. You have next to Tua here on our show sheet just the word "ew." Explain that reason there for me.
Yeah. What we want to see out of him in 2023 was a injury-free season, and
Mhm.
we did get to see that, which was exciting. Unfortunately, for a pocket quarterback that is throwing to Tyreek Hill, that's throwing to Jalen Waddle, that's working with Mike McTamany, one of the most exciting, innovative systems in America, you put this note here, he only had 4 games of 20-plus points. If you have a Tyreek Hill type talent, you should be able to have a higher weekly ceiling, and I just don't think that he hit that as often as we were excited about. And the floor kind of fell out at times. So he's not somebody that I'm looking at. If you are walking away from a one quarterback team with Tua as your quarterback, you're probably hitting the waiver wire the next week.
Yeah, I think that's the more surprising, and I was looking that up. I would have guessed if you had told me before I looked it up that Tua would have had maybe 6, 7 games of 20 plus points. Only 4 with Tyreek Hill on the roster, and even Jalen Waddle, who had a disappointing season, is shocking to me. I know Raheem Mostert scored a ton of rushing touchdowns, but the Miami Dolphins scored a ton of points. It's hard to believe that Tua only had 4 games of 20 plus points. Again, I do think he's a good streamer, but I don't know if I'm going to feel confident rolling out there with him week one, and especially in a 10-team league. Definitely a 12, we can have the conversation. Super flex, of course, but as far as a set and forget guy, Tua just didn't get to that point for me last season, like you said. So at this point, we've got 3 in the elite tier, we've got 4 in the weekly set and forget. That's 7. And then we've got 10, 13, 15, and then down to those streamers, we've got 18. So in a 12-team league, we've already gone through 18 guys that, you feel good, some better than others about. Is it safe to say that this position is deep heading into 2024?
100%. When we talked about the good, not great tier, we put Patrick Mahomes in the set and forget tier. He had less points per game than Jordan Love. He had less points per game than Dak Prescott. He had less points per game than a couple of guys that are in there. Like, if you are in a 12-team league and people aren't being crazy reaching on quarterbacks, there's an opportunity to grab some of these late guys. And we haven't even talked about the rookies, which one of them is going to get me hot and bothered, and that's a teaser for a couple minutes from now. I think the strength of the quarterback position makes it so that if you're not playing in super flex leagues, you should consider it because it makes it a little more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think the position has really just started to blossom as far as the amount of guys that are, we get excited to watch each week, elevating the guys around them. The position has just really never been better, in my opinion, across the 32 teams. So Superflex is definitely the way to go. I think in today's day and age for fantasy football, you're just able to believe and trust more of these guys in your lineup. You're not really stuck with starting Derek Carr per se. If you're in a 12-team league, I don't think he's a top 24 fantasy quarterback, but maybe you have to if you decide to fade the position a little bit. An interesting note here: quarterbacks to average 20 plus fantasy points per game in the last 5 seasons. Quarterbacks that played 8 games, I should say. 2019 we had 8. 2020 we had 10. 2021 we had 10. 2022 we only had 6, and then last year we only had 4 quarterbacks average 20 or more points per game that played in 8 games or more. Just goes to show you how battered the position was. We lost Herbert. We lost Joe Burrow. We even lost CJ Stroud for a little bit when he was on a tear due to concussions. So fear not. I do think the position is still deep. I agree with you. And then we didn't even mention some of these guys: Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Will Levis. I don't want to mention these guys, but Daniel Jones, Bryce Young, could they emerge and be something? And then we have those free agents or guys likely to be moving: Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, even Jimmy G to some degree if some team is foolish enough to give him a starting job. That's a large handful of guys we didn't even talk about that if you do play in a super flex league, you can pluck them off the deeper in drafts or even off the waiver wire at times and start them. Any of these free agents that I just mentioned, Kirk Cousins, maybe Russell Wilson, Baker, if anywhere, could these players rise up? Not a play on Atlanta there, but any of these players that you like that if they went somewhere you'd feel a lot better about, or are what they are at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I want to anchor on Kirk Cousins real quick. I have the points per game for last year pulled up. Who had more points per game, Kirk Cousins or Kyler Murray?
I mean, just for the sake of the game, I think it's Kirk Cousins.
It's Kirk Cousins. Who had more points per game, Kirk Cousins or Justin Herbert?
Oh yeah, I know that's Kirk Cousins.
Patrick Mahomes. We can keep going down the line.
Yeah,
Kirk Cousins, he was solid when he was
yeah.
playing in Minnesota. So I think if he stays there, is able to have Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson as targets, like he's able to really take advantage of that offense and that system. And if you're waiting on a quarterback, Kirk Cousins in Minnesota is a great fit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he stays there. I'm not sure if he does head to Atlanta. A lot of people are speculating that. We're not here to speculate that. We'll, have another show here on Fantrax down the road when we talk about those free agent signings. But again, whoever does land in Minnesota, if it is Kirk Cousins, I like that a lot because Kevin O'Connell, the head coach there, loves to pass the ball. You've got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. If Kirk Cousins does stay there, he's a very sneaky late round guy that you can pretty much get for free in drafts just because he's not as popular as some of the other names we talked about here tonight. All right, let's get to these rookies. There are plenty of rookies we can talk about, but I think the big three we need to touch on are Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. They are the projected top three at the position. They might even go 1, 2, 3 in the draft. Will any of these guys be start worthy? Where will they be playing? If, I just said we're not speculating, but I think we have a
Yep.
good idea. And then are there any sleepers in this class, on the tail end of this conversation you want to mention here?
Yeah. Caleb Williams is going to be start worthy at times. He's
Mm-hmm.
going to immediately slot into that streamer tier. His ability to extend plays and really make things happen with his legs on top of his arm is going to make him a valuable asset. He's going to play in Chicago. They're taking him 1. That's
Mm-hmm.
easy enough. Drake May is probably going to be off my redraft radar unless I'm playing in Superflex. I think that he's going to go 3rd overall to New England, which means that number 2 overall, I actually think they're going to take a swing on Jaden Daniels. He would be an exciting addition, which Washington just needs a little excitement in their system. And he's also my favorite. What he brings with his run ability, this is the closest thing to Lamar Jackson we've seen as a rusher. He doesn't have the same make a guy miss in a phone booth, but he has a similar rushing style, slight build. And I know he's not great at protecting himself, but he is a little better than people give him credit for. His arm talent is out of this world. We were able to see him work with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Now he's just immediately going to slot into Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and then maybe they add somebody or they keep Curtis Samuel. Like, there's worse landing spots in Washington, and I would just love to see him there. He would actually slide right into a top 10 to 12 quarterback that I would feel comfortable grabbing him with my last pick in the draft, starting in week 1 and feeling good about my quarterback position in one quarterback.
Yeah, I know a lot of people take the safe and upside approach. You draft a guy you feel a little bit better about, maybe in the mid rounds, and then grab a guy like Jaden Daniels towards the end, get that upside pick in case that safe option is only averaging 17, 18 points a game. But if Jaden Daniels emerges and has like an RG3 like season in Washington, if he ends up there, you just hit big time. I don't think this is a situation like last year where Bryce Young, the number 1 pick, performs worse, much worse than number 2 pick CJ Stroud. I do think Caleb Williams is going to have value, like you said, at times. I like Jaden Daniels to go second. I like Washington bringing in Cliff Kingsbury. I know he's not the best offensive coordinator, but he's worked with a mobile quarterback before in Kyler Murray down in Arizona, so that could be a nice fit there. Maybe a precursor to drafting Jaden Daniels there.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to touch on here is just a trend that I noticed, doing a deep dive into the quarterback position. The last 11 MVP winners in the league were quarterbacks. That's Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers again, Patrick Mahomes again, and then obviously Lamar Jackson. None of these guys finished worse than quarterback 6 in fantasy football when they were MVP or during their MVP season. 5 of them finished as the overall QB1 on a points per game basis. So any bold predictions, or is this just going to be a chalky, Mahomes, maybe Josh Allen finally gets one or Lamar again, but who do you have in the mix for the MVP 2024 award here that people should be targeting based on this trend that's going to, fulfill, the production as far as fantasy football goes?
Yep. So we have been looking at that. There's all the regular suspects. So there's Mahomes, there's Allen, there's Lamar.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear us say that. CJ Stroud. They add somebody in the draft, or they find somebody in free agency. He already had that amazing rookie year. Like the
Yep.
year 2 bump is a thing, especially for good quarterbacks, which we know CJ Stroud is. So I'm really excited to see what he does if they add another weapon, if they, reinforce the offensive line a little bit. if they end up being 11-6, if they end up being 12-5, CJ Stroud's going to be on a lot of people's MVP ballots, and you can get in early. Those odds are good right now.
Yeah, I especially like that Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator from last year, is sticking around. He was in the head coaching mix, rumored to go actually up to Washington, a team we just talked about, but he is sticking in Houston to work with Stroud even further. I really like the continuity there. Always good when a young quarterback gets to keep his original offensive coordinator. All right, Mike. So just to summarize what we talked about here today, again, Tuesday, February 20th, coming out on a Friday, we've got the quarterback position is pretty deep. I think we both agree on that. We've got an elite tier, and then we've got a whole bunch of other guys we feel, varying levels of good about. So what is your strategy going into the 2024 redraft season, especially? Are you a guy that's going to target those elite guys, or do you feel that you're going to take maybe that safe and upside approach, or just wait completely and just gobble up whoever's left over at the end?
Yes. So unless I'm getting one of those top 3 guys that I know is going to be a difference maker, I'm going to wait almost completely. There's so many great options right now. We're talking about Brock Purdy, who his ADP is outside the top 12. His points per game were inside the top 10 last year. We're talking about Jordan Love. We're talking about Jaden Daniels, what he does on the ground. There are so many opportunities to get. If you're not getting the top 3, the difference between 4 and like 15 was only a point or 2 in points per game last year. It's going to look very similar this year with how deep the position is. So I'm just going to punt entirely because I'd rather go grab 3 true difference makers at receiver and running back or tight end, and then grab a quarterback pretty late in the draft.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to take the same approach just based on how things went last year. Again, that recency bias. A lot of people that took the Burrows, the Herberts, what have you early on that end up getting burned by injuries nonetheless may feel just better about waiting at the position and getting some of these guys later on as well. I think that's going to be a popular strategy. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to talk the quarterback position. Where can people find your work out there in the fantasy space?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Fantrax does some great work, and it was really cool to chat with you. If you are looking for me on Twitter, it's at FF Mike Cash with a K. If you're looking for more of my lovely voice, it's the Fantasy Football RPG podcast. It's the one with all the dragons as the cover art. Yes, we are super nerdy. And if you're looking for written content, it's Last Word on Pro Football. I'm an editor and a writer over there. So if you're looking for draft profiles, dynasty profiles, deep dives, statistics, that's where you can find it. Thanks again.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Thank you for joining me tonight. Everyone, we'll be back next week for another Fantrax Football Friday, talking everything, breaking news, recent transactions when those come around, and just really trying to get an edge for the 2024 fantasy football season. Mike, thanks again. The CJ Stroud MVP campaign starts today, and we'll catch you guys next week. Take it easy.
Have a good one.